Excellent, thanks. I want to thank the ISSA, the committee, Chris Armstrong for qualifying us and going through the vetting process, allowing us to be here today. Thank the members and the non-members as well. So, no, we're excited. Hopefully this is something you haven't seen. There's a couple familiar faces in the room, but this is a new industry. We are first of a kind to market with what we do. And as I get into the discussion, you'll start to ask yourself, where has that been? That sounds pretty something that should have been already in the market. And some of the best ideas are the most obvious. And so as I get into the discussion, hopefully I'll change your expectation of what traditional storage could have done. By the way, I'm most likely the first storage vendor that's ever been in a ISSA chapter discussion. If you think about that, why is that, first of all? Why has storage not been more involved in the security space? And we'll obviously touch on that as well. The primary reason is that I'm here today is for this. Most organizations have no idea what's in their data, and they don't know who's touching it. Those two problems alone create a lot of obvious security issues. So if I can start to answer those questions, and if you're one of those 93% that, yeah, I don't know what's in my data today, and I don't know who's touching it, we can start to answer some of those questions for you. Most of that data that we're focused on is that human-generated content, what our employees, what we create on a day-to-day basis. It's obviously the spreadsheets and the PowerPoints, the Word documents, the PDFs, et cetera. Out of those billions of files that exist in your environment today, where are the sensitive documents? Where's the social security numbers, the credit card numbers, the pornography that exist in our file shares within our environment today? If you can answer those questions, then what is it about the security that your approach today that potentially includes some gaps? What we're finding today in data, there's a couple of touch points here, but pretty interesting. You probably don't need me to offer a POC to tell you have sensitive data exposed today. Most organizations would raise their hands, yes, I do, but the pain of trying to identify that is too cumbersome, too costly, too complex to do so. These are a couple of examples of what we have found in our customers' data. On the far right, just the inefficiencies of your data. Their iPhones that they've downloaded into your public shares, the copyright infringement that may exist today and within your environment. Data that's obviously not driving efficiencies within your organization that you're backing up, you're replicating, you're managing incrementally from a backup perspective every day, but also it's creating a lot of inefficiencies. Everybody is buying more storage, and that's not necessarily the right answer. Storage has essentially become a bit bucket where your data has gone to die. 9 out of 10 times, as soon as someone saves a file, that they don't touch it again. So why do we continue to do the things? A lot of that is the wasted content within your data. But here on the left-hand side, the first virtual machine a customer moved over to us, 600 instances of PII data in that first virtual machine. So, that's a lot of PII data, and I know this room knows that, but just in case, so social security numbers, birth dates, address, postal codes, anything obviously related to that personal identifiable information. Today, how do we identify a malware, a cryptoware, some type of evasion in scanning through our files? How do we do that real time? We'll touch on some of those aspects today. We had a municipality move over a file share to us, and we found autopsy photos and coroner reports in the public share. Literally pictures of dead people in an unsecured location, a thumb drive away from walking out the door. So were those photos there the day before we showed up? No, they were there for years. Who touched them, who copied them, who had access to that sensitive information? Or employees leaving. Who in here had an employee leave in the past year? How do you know what files they copied to a thumb drive or dropped into Dropbox prior to walking out the door? If we can answer those questions at the point of storage, then perhaps we can take a more of an inside-out approach to security. And that's kind of our philosophy. Most organizations have been focused on the perimeter, and that's a good place to start. But our philosophy is you can't firewall stupid. What does that mean? 3/4 of our breaches happen and start with our own employees. It's our own practices internally that create a lot of our pain and a lot of our issues. Our approach is here at the core. Our weakest link in most security efforts today are the people. It's the training, it's the enforcement of policies, it's the behaviors, it's the interaction. Who has access to what? Who's clicking on an email right now? Who just dragged and dropped the salary file into the public folder? Who just left a password exposed that gave someone permissions or access? Currently, there's the tools used to monitor those activities at the core have been cumbersome or costly to date, and so we're looking to change that. And so that's kind of what we're talking about today. We believe all layers of your infrastructure should support your security efforts. And right now, traditional storage actually hinders that because it leaves you blind to what's in it and who's touching it. How do you protect your kids unless you know where they are? Well, how do you protect your data unless you know what's in it? And that's some of the things that we'll start to walk through today. So this slide here is, number one, is not a list of my customers. This is to make a couple of points. Data has become the currency, and data is a currency now. Instead of the organization across the street competing with you, it's easier to go after your data at this point. You don't have to be a government entity. You can be a boots and western wear entity. You can be a beauty distributor. The St. Louis Cardinals just hacked into the Houston Astros for player profile information. Data has become that currency. And the problem is 3/4 of those breaches start here, and at the top there, that's been the traditional tactic. With a lot of organizations trying to achieve that security through obscurity, keeping that head in the sand, or just the plausible deniability approach. If I don't know it's there, then it's never a responsibility. Those type of aspects are changing. So what DataGravity has introduced, we've taken traditional storage, which we look at as a commodity. A 2 terabyte hard drive from Seagate is $65. That is a commodity. If the cloud can do the same thing that traditional storage is, we're talking about commodity componentry at this point. Storage is the last thing to evolve in the data center. If you think about it, it's still the same that it was 25 years ago when it was introduced by digital equipment. It hasn't evolved. It's still a bit bucket, a container, again, where your data goes to die. If I can answer those 5 questions though, and by embedding analytics inside of a primary device, I can start to answer some interesting questions about the data that has traditionally not been there. The traditional approach has been this. It's been a software approach. It's an install and crawl type approach to where you're adding layers of software across your network, your endpoints, into your servers, yes, into your storage, and you're crawling for information, you're scanning for information. In most cases, those traditional approaches have been, the overhead that it introduces into the environment, into your infrastructure, has been painful. So most organizations, do they run the scans 24/7? No, it's a moment in time. You run it after the breach occurs, maybe on the weekends, maybe at the end of the year prior to the audit. So therefore, your answers about your data and who's touching it are too late. So what we've simply taken is those same analytics, those same approaches, and simply embed all those into an appliance. Put the analytics at the core, at the disk layer where your data resides. And by doing that, as your users start to touch data, interact with data, save a PDF at 2 o'clock in the afternoon that has 13 social security numbers in it, we text analyze that real time, and we see that approach. So this is what, the data-aware storage industry is. We are the first to market with products. We've been around for a couple of years, stealth mode for 5 years, and we released the product at VMworld back in 2014. But by doing this, now I can give you real-time answers about the data. So if you think about that approach, most organizations have the skill set around IP or around iSCSI today. So you're not introducing any additional complexity, but as a byproduct of your data passing through an appliance, I can start to answer those questions and make the organization, or make the data aware. And it's answering those questions, the who, what, when, where, and why of that data. The key to this is we're doing it real time. As Sarah saves the PDF, I see it. I just saw 13 social security numbers as she saved it, and I just shot an alert out. Well, a malware just touched 400 of your files in the past hour because someone clicked on an email. That's I/O. That I/O, where is that? That's on a primary storage device. I see that I/O activity, and I shoot out an alert. Thomas just turned his 2-week notice in and just deleted or just copied 20 files to a thumb drive. What is that? That's I/O activity. If we can see those heuristics and those patterns established from those touch points, and we can start to alert on that. Again, the key to this is real time as those interactions are happening in the middle of the day. It's a new approach. Take the analytics world that has been out there and can get the job done, except for the overhead, the complexity, the cost. Embed that into an appliance. put it at the disk layer, use those commodity components, those $65 hard drives, use those to drive awareness down at the disk layer. So that's it from a slide perspective. We want to get into a live demo and actually kind of show you guys these what these questions are that we start to answer. But as I kind of segue over to that, any quick questions, any initial quick thoughts? By the way, I have two engineers over here. I have Keith Kinser and Monty McDavid with me as well. So we are happy to field questions. So I'll start here close.
Just a point of clarification, are you talking about all of your existing storage, taking that on and replacing it with your equipment, or leaving all of that in place and adding one piece of your equipment that can analyze everything in your existing environment? Good.
So are we talking about replacing all the existing storage in the environment, or using our device to touch the storage that exists within that framework today? Good question. Perhaps both. So a couple of things. We were at ConocoPhillips. They have 26 petabytes of data. I don't even scale that high yet, 26 petabytes of data. However, they did have litigation needs, and they were sued every other week. They'd like to know what's in their HR and their finance data. So what they did, since I don't scale to that, they put just their HR finance data on DataGravity, so that now I can ease that litigation and that eDiscovery process, and I'll get into that, so that I can help identify. What if you had, we use Google every day. What if you had Google into your file data, into your folders? So as I do my text analytics, I catalog and index that data at the ingestion point. So now I just made it searchable. So now I can type in the word confidential and pull up every file in my environment that has the word confidential in it. I can type in the word salary. We do that, and that's where we find offer letters and salary files in the unsecured folders. The other point to this is, what if my device looked into your existing storage? Today we're doing that with NetApp. So I can connect into a NetApp array and use their snapshot technology to then run my analysis inside of that particular array. So we will continue to expand that out onto additional. The problem then, though, is that I'm right back to where the software approach has been in the industry. What if I now introduce overhead into that existing NetApp infrastructure? You didn't design the NetApp to run analytics on it. So there's pain associated with that. That's why most customers look to offload that, and primarily it's just that file data. Today our focus is unstructured and semi-structured data. So file, your Exchange environment. I'm not looking into databases today. There's been tools out there, so that's not been a focus. It's that unstructured environment. So perhaps both, depending on the current framework. Yes?
In the example you gave about the I/O for things being copied to a jump drive, you did that. What's the business rule tool that you're using to also do the codependent analysis of me turning in my letter of resignation that sees me do that? How do you do that in real time? I can see after the fact, but not in real time.
Do you understand?
I didn't quite get the question. Can we do
So
that
the
one more time?
the example he gave was 25 files get copied to a jump drive at the same time I turn in my letter of resignation. And you do that in real time. How do you know to look at me in real time to see my turning in letter of resignation and I'm copying 25 files out to the jump drive? I get how you do it after the fact, but not real time.
Got it. Okay. Everybody hear that? Should I repeat? Everybody okay? So what we're doing is we're capturing the who, the what, the when, the where, and the why. So all file activities, if you will, file-based activities, actually real time. So as the I/O happens, we are in a parallel I/O path in an offload sort of a way, which goes back to your question, by the way, in terms of how you do this without using my storage on somebody else's storage platform. But we're capturing that live and in real time. So that's the first part. I know the activities. So if I had already set an alarm that says I want to know anybody that's deleted 20, I want the name, if you will, of anybody that deletes 25 files within the span of a 15 or 30 minute or 1 hour time frame, then I'm going to get an alert on that basis. I don't know that you just turned that email you just sent was a resignation notice. I don't know that at that point in time, but I've got the forensic trail that tells me what you did. Then when I do get your resignation notice, and we recognize that there's been some data corruption, data loss, data transfers, data reads, data dumps, data deletes, on and on and on. We can do this forever. Then I can do absolute correlations between what happened and you. That's how I do that. Does that make sense? Everybody good?
Yeah, the example I used earlier, the employee that was leaving a law firm, she was copying and downloading all the photos of her cats onto Dropbox. Great, but she was also taking case files. So I see that activity and I see a spike. So, and I'll get into that shortly, but an employee's looked at 15 megs of data a day for the last 2 years. This morning, that specific employee looked at 2 gigs. I see the irregularities on those patterns, and now I just establish that, or I set alerts. If any employee deletes, reads, copies a threshold of files over a course of time, I shoot out alerts and notifications based on that. Maybe HR has this tool, so I'll show you how HR, this is an HTML5 interface that I'll present to even the end users within your environment. So HR gets a 2-week notice, they go in and put an alert on that specific employee. Now they know if that employee, and yeah, most employees are going to touch a lot of files as they exit, but maybe they want to know if they're touching the HR, the finance, maybe the legal folder, the public folder, who cares? You know, so we can set up those various alerts. Yes, go ahead.
This sounds an awful lot like there's some overlap perhaps between this solution and something like QRadar or some other DLP solutions. What differentiates you guys from QRadar?
Yeah, so good question. So there is a lot of overlap. You'll hear me touch on eDiscovery, DLP, file activity tracking. I'll touch on about 10 to 15 different technologies, and that is the difference. I've embedded about 10 to 15 different answers into a purpose-built appliance. So I've used the wasted resources. If anybody knows anything about storage, secondary controllers have been underutilized. They sit there and wait for the other one to fail before you ever actually use them. Think about SSDs and flash technology. That has driven down in cost and has essentially become a commodity. I'm using those resources to give you about 10 to 15 different answers about your data that you may have had to deploy multiple different tools, manage multiple different tools, and most of those would have been a software type approach. I've embedded those into an appliance, into a purpose-built, a traditional 10 gig iSCSI appliance. And as we get into the demo, I think that'll answer a lot of your questions. You'll see like, well, yeah, that does have an eDiscovery element. That does have a DLP element. Is it enough? Does it address enough of the DLP answers you need? We can talk through that. Yeah.
Question, do you have a workflow engine? Is that workflow what do you not instruct that's kind of my question to ask? Yeah. So you have a workflow engine for your tool. Does that integrate with things like for example, like let's say associate rate is trying to integrate with
So the question was, do we have a workflow, essentially a workflow process within inside the array that can integrate with an external program like ADP in the event that an employee turns in a resignation and we want to be able to go out and look at everything that they've done. So yeah, I think the short answer to that is not built into the array, but I think that's a workflow process that you're going to create outside. So when an employee actually turns in their resignation to HR, you can now go into the array itself, set an activity track on an individual user, and we can track that through NIST, through Active Directory, whatever it may be. So now over the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever that time frame is for resignation, we can monitor anything and everything that user does, right, and report that back to HR before he checks out. And this kind of goes back to that earlier question, right? Is the process internal? It's not necessarily internal. That would require you guys to create some workflow outside in your departments like HR. Now, on top of that, I want to go a step further. We can always do activity tracking, as Brian said, according to percentage. So as soon as he gets into the dashboard here, you guys will see that we actually monitor activity tracking on a user level on a regular basis. So this dashboard will tell you essentially if a user that you've never seen before jumps in and starts doing a lot of activity, you can correlate that and look at it. We can also set activity tracking to say any user that goes above a percentage of reads or writes, we'll get an alert on that on a regular basis. So we can preemptively say, what if it's an employee that's not turning in his resignation, but he's actually feeding information to a competitor? We can, by activity tracking, alert and say, this guy's doing a lot more than he's ever done before. What's going on here? You guys can go research it at that point.
The food is making its rounds. I already see empty bowls. Fish, pasta. So what I'm going to do is now get into the demo portion and just lay a couple of groundwork pieces that anybody that's touched storage or has looked at data. This is a traditional storage array. The 20 terabytes you buy every year, these are the answers you get from traditional storage today. It tells you how fast it's going and how much I have left. That's it. That's as intelligent as storage has gotten in regards to your data. This is, again, I'm going to just to reaffirm, this is an appliance approach. So your data, that subset of your data would reside in a data-aware appliance. It's got SSDs, it's got large storage for persistent data. So that's it from a storage perspective. So this will be one of the few storage discussions you'll see where I won't even mention IOP or terabyte. Anybody that's sat through a storage meeting, a briefing, it's all about speeds and feeds. How fast can I make the data go? That's not a problem anymore. SSDs, flash, that's pretty prevalent on the market. So I'm going to get straight out of that and then get into what we call a discover tile. So you see these 3 tiles here. Only your storage administrator will see these 2 tiles. Everyone else, potentially, if you roll it out, but from the day one, you will not want to roll it out, and I'll show you why. But from day one, customers, the first things they do, they storage vMotion some data over to our appliance, and they want to start searching it. Your president of your company today can Google what type of BMW he or she's going to buy, but you can't even Google your own data. Why is that? Your data is your biggest asset, but it's also your biggest liability. And you can't even, in most organizations, you can't even find it. That's why we have duplicates of duplicates and copies of copies, because employees are creating the same thing over and over. So if you look here, what I'll do as a company moves a file share over, and so in this case, I'm looking into my public folder, I just type the word confidential in. I just searched a SAN in Nashua, New Hampshire on Maggiano's wireless network. In about 3 seconds, I got a hit of 450 files that have the word confidential not in the file name, not in the metadata. It could be there, but also when we did our text or content analytics on the file, I text analyzed it and indexed all the data within the body of those files. So now I've got a hit of 450, I got PDFs, I've got Word documents just in these first 5 or 6. Out of those, and there's Project Woodstock financials, somewhere in those files, the word confidential resides. Well, now that I've got that data, what can I do with it? I can look over here on the left-hand side, and I'm not getting a good, but it talks about ownership. Who's the owner? Who's actually the employee that's putting confidential files on the public folder? Is any of these employees, are they in finance? Are they in HR? Is that where they're putting the confidential data today? Out of those 450 files, I'm going to click on what we call tags. Out of those 450 files, how many of them have social security numbers, credit card numbers, the word highly confidential, email addresses, US addresses, the word milk, I don't care. We set up a regex pattern, and so as I do my text analytics, I'm looking for content that you've asked me to look for. Automatically, I'm going to look for social security numbers, credit card numbers, postal codes, URIs, email addresses. But then if you want me to go and find every file that has the word milk, I will. We had a law firm, one of their partners was going through divorce proceedings. They want us to find the name of his name and the word orgasm in every file. I knew I'd get some people's attention on that. It's not often you do a technology presentation, get to mention the word orgasm. Anyways, what's in your data today? How do you know you don't have files? How do you know you don't have racial files? How do you know you don't have sexually explicit content in your files? Content that maybe in the 80s or 90s, we could get away with it, but that data is still in there. What if it's on your company letterhead? Would you rather me text analyze it at the ingestion point as the employee saves that file, or would you prefer a malware scan it and put those answers on the internet? And that's essentially the question. At some point, that data is going to be breached. This allows organizations, data awareness allows companies to get in front of that, but all they're doing is managing a 10 gig iSCSI appliance. I just provided search into that data down at the disk layer where, oh, by the way, that's where the data resides. We believe that's where the security process should start, an inside-out approach. Yes, sir.
In this example, do we assume that all the data is non-encrypted? Will it matter if it's encrypted?
Yeah, so is this data encrypted? So if that file is encrypted, I can't do my content or my text analytics on that file. I can tell you the who, what, and when, who just saved an encrypted file, who just touched it, what was the activity related to that, but I cannot look inside of it. So that's where in most organizations, especially healthcare, so allow me to do the encryption. So we do encryption at rest on the appliance. So I satisfy that checkbox from an encryption standpoint. And if that file is not encrypted, I'm assuming you knew what you were doing if you encrypted the file and that data is protected. If it's not encrypted, I'll do the content analytics and then encrypt that file at rest for you as well. But good question. So now I've got I'll kind of get out of the search, but I'll get a couple of more examples here. Let's look at, like the word salary. That's one that a lot of organizations are searching for. This is where we find, and I'll see if any pop up, offer letters. What was the first thing the employee did when he came on board? You know, he had access to maybe one share. The employee dumps their offer letters into the public share. Now every employee, this is where, 7 out of 10 times, we find the salary file for the entire company in the public folder. The HR generalist was dragging and dropping it to the finance folder, and she accidentally dropped it into the public folder. Now, just simple things like the salary file for every employee, everyone having access to that data, potentially being exposed. Here is where we can type in just the word password. I'm going to type in the word password. We do this in the IT folder. Obviously, we find a lot of files that have passwords in them. Maybe they're supposed to be there. I'll let you make that decision. I bring that data to the surface. I'm again searching a SAN, and this is HTML5. I can do this on my phone. I bring that data to the surface, but I only have access to the folder that I have AD permissions to. So this could be rolled out to every user in the organization. Think about marketing and sales being able to type in ABC Company Inc. and find every file related to that company. Sales just brought that data to life versus trying to go recreate another document, and now you've got 20 duplicates of the same document. So I'll only see if I only have access to the public folder. That's all that will appear in the drop-down due to our AD integration. Yes, sir.
From a eDiscovery standpoint, do you have verbose logging on the searches that we do?
Verbose login, chain of custody.
If I'm doing those searches, I need to be able to prove that I did them when I do them, what I do with the data, etc.
Short answer is yes. So everything that's going on, everything Brian's doing on this array right now is being pushed down to an audit trail, and if, for that matter, if you wanted to, also out to syslog, and we can interface with SIM environments and things like that. So yeah,
Is that audit log locked so you can't correlate?
Absolutely. Actually, and it's more than we want to get into in this hour, but we have 4 user types or login type IDs, if you will. The casual user who has only access to the files that he already had, or the shares and things like that he already had access to based on what was granted through Active Directory in the first place. Super user on the other end can pretty much do everything, but there's an audit user. There's a storage administration user, and I want to leave that out, but then there's an audit user. The audit user, of which I suppose there'd only be 1 or 2 of those folks in the entire company normally, probably you and a backup, right? But in any event, the audit user has access to those logs, and and nobody else actually does. So, and as well as search capabilities, again, into the files and shares and environments that he has normal access to anyway, but not globally. That would be a super user type. Does that make sense? Back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Monty. So what I'm going to do, what I did, if you'll notice, I left my public share. I've gone over to my HR share, and I just typed in the word resume. I tend to focus on the negative aspects of data too much, so I try to go to something positive. Resumes, that's intellectual property. That's data we can use to drive hiring and firing processes within our organization. That's a pool of talent that we have. The problem is most HR generalists, they can't find it. They can't lay their hands on it, they can't locate it. Well, I know they can't locate the 707 files in the HR folder that have the word resume somewhere in there. They can't do that in 2 seconds. This makes the data more valuable. Instead of storage or IT being measured on $1 per gig or $1 per IOUT basis, we are changing the equation to $1 per answer. Now if IT is measured on $1 per answer, I just changed the value proposition of data and how data is both protected and used within an organization. I just brought 707 resumes to life. Maybe I don't need them anymore. Maybe these files are, most of these look like they're from 2014, November 2014 here, but maybe I want to now just find the resumes that have the word John. I interviewed a candidate 6 months ago, wasn't time, but now it is. All I can remember his name was John. I typed the word John in, I just filtered down those 707 resumes to the 7 that have the word John. I can start to correlate those searches and bring that data to life. Yes, sir.
Let's talk a little automation. Can I, as a user, build a regularly recurring search based on saved criteria? So let's say I'm looking for, just pick your term, whatever it may be. I need to have intelligence on a weekly basis.
Yeah, so
What's old, what's
I'll keep you from having to explain yourself. Yes. So what I did, I just clicked on my saved searches. These are saved searches that I've built and saved. So I've got media files, financial records, and mission reportings. So I do that, and then if you see in the top right-hand corner, so I'll click on this one. How long would it take you to find all the media files in your organization? I just clicked on media files, and I just listed the 382 files that have those file extensions in 3 seconds. Now, I want to subscribe to that search, and every Friday at 5 o'clock, I want to run that scan, and I want to purge those files before I take my full backup, so that I'm not backing up the Taylor Swift and the Bon Jovi files that I have here. So I can automate those searches, and I can do that publicly or privately. You can see there, I had 2 different listings of those searches. I can do it for my own purposes, or now everyone in the HR folder can take advantage of my subscription or search. Are you thinking? Yeah. Okay. And so here's what on Friday at 5, I set up what type of search, and I want to email now those 382 files. I want to email that to me. I get it, I click my link, and I can purge that data at that point, or I want to push those 382 files to the cloud. I'll push those files to the cloud for you. But over here on my tags, if any of these happen to have credit card numbers in them, I hold on to those. I'm assuming you're not wanting to push your credit card or social security numbers to the cloud. I'll hold those and just push my blank space Taylor Swift.mp3 file to the cloud for you. This is my manual search. This is one of 15 things that I do. I'm just showing you now a Google-like experience into your data, how that can potentially provide, get in front of the negative aspects. Again, I can go search for pornography here. I can go search for resumes, both the good and bad related to that data. I'm going to get out of this in just a matter of time. We could drill into that more. What I'm going to do now is kind of get into file analytics. So again, I embedded analytics, a software approach. I embedded it at the disk layer. We did that for 2 reasons. That's where your data is, at the disk layer. But also by doing that, I can give you real-time visibility into that data. These are all my mount points. I've got my public folder, which is my largest, all the way down to my smallest. I've got my finance folder, my IT, marketing. These could be virtual desktop sessions. So I look inside of your user's virtual desktop, their data images, or this could be your virtual machines, a CIFS image, etc. But as I scroll over each one of these, you can see on the left-hand side, the information about that particular folder, that virtual machine, changes. I get a different set of answers about consumption, activity, and the dormancy of that data. This data is in your storage appliance today. Everybody here has storage. It's in the cloud or it's on premise. This data is available today, but your storage has not been designed to tell you this about your data. The metadata is there, the data about the data. All we're doing is collecting it and putting it to what we think is a very consumer-oriented interface so that now you can use it. This is not very IT-minded. We had 2 gentlemen from Apple design this to make it, a word Monty just used a minute ago, pretty. So that your HR, your finance, your legal teams can actually see bubbles and click on them. And I'll click on a bubble and show you what it does. Our non-IT minded individuals, actually the people that are asking for this in HR and legal and finance, Are they going to use the tools if we make it, the command line and script and a lot of tools? So what we did, I clicked on my public share and I just brought consumption to life. Who's using the data, our resources, the assets of the company in the public share? Richard is using 46 of the 128 gigs, almost half the data, a third of the data. Why? Is what Richard's doing so strategic that he's using a third of our resources? Do I want to click on Richard's name and dive into his files? We can, and I will. So let's keep moving though. I/O. So I look at I/O activities. This is a heat map that the names enlarge and scale out based on real-time I/O. So Dave Williams, that candidate I talked about earlier, he's looked at 15 megs of data a day. Well, this morning he looked at 2 gigs. Why? Did he just turn in his 2-week notice, or is that a malware that just took over his user account and is scanning our files? Well, I see that activity and I shoot out alerts based on that. So Dave Williams is the heat map. This is a dashboard that I'm going to just kind of drive through for illustration purposes today. I don't expect you to stare at this, so we automate every single one of these fields, and I'll show you how we do that as well. Yeah, sorry, go ahead, sir.
What do you mean when you say someone looked at 2 gigs?
Looked at, touched, accessed, modified, read, copied, deleted. A touch point with the file. That's an I/O activity. I see that. I'm an appliance. And that data, they touch that data on my disk, and so I see that activity real time. So it could be any of those respected touch points.
And so real quickly, this may be where you were really going. The file attributes, the SMB protocol attributes that get logged in that audit log, by the way, don't suggest, they provide a pattern, sort of a fingerprinting sort of a pattern that establishes the fact that this person did a copy and paste or a drag and drop. From a file attribute standpoint, file operation standpoint, it doesn't matter if I do a copy and paste or a drag and drop. It's all the same down at the sys share level. But we see those operations, we see the sequence of those operations, and that's how it can be established. And this is already held up in court, by the way, I might add. We've got one legal firm up in the Massachusetts area that had to take somebody to court, and they used this mechanism to establish what this ex-employee had actually done. But that pattern tells us that they were dragging and dropping files off of the file share onto whatever, USB stick, personal laptop, home computer. We don't know where it goes once it's off the array or what they did with it, but the point is we know they took it, right? So if that's where you were going with that, it's those file operations that tell us everything you need to know about what's really going on. Yes, sir?
Yeah, I have a question. You said that you can detect things like pornography. How is that done?
Well, so I guess it really depends on the content, but there's 2 or 3 things going on. Now, from an imagery standpoint, just like who asked the question about encryption? That was you, wasn't it, sir? So the bitstream stuff, this is a text content analyzer environment, right? So if there's no text, I got nothing to go on, at least not at this point. We are, parenthetically, I'll get to your question, working on embedding OCR technologies in there as well, so we can go ahead and do scans through things like embedded text, image, pictures and things like that, like inside a PDF. So I go through the text, I see a picture. Is that picture text oriented? I'll OCR that part, then jump back to text analysis and things like that. But if it's pure bitstream, there's not really anything I can do with it. Yet, sometimes, in 2 points, 2 paths here, 2 channels, if you will, the metadata itself is suggestive of what it actually is from a patterning standpoint. And the second part is, and Brian hasn't gotten to this yet, but notice right up here, there's this thing on the file, we call it, this is a SHA-1 MD5, fingerprint, if you will. So we're fingerprinting all the files. So now I'm in over my head. I'm speaking to a room of people that already understand all this, but there's service organizations around that catalog and index all of those kinds of things. So you can actually use this to compare against those kinds of things, finding other instances of the same file on this entire platform, using this to upload and do and use them really as a service to do comparisons to confirm for you that, yep, this was indeed a bad file, one that the FBI wouldn't approve of, things like that. So you can clean up your environment so they don't come take your storage away from you and things like that. Does that make sense? So it's not absolute. If it was really overt and obvious, we'd pick it up, but there's going to be situations from a bitstream standpoint that, yeah, you're not really going to know about that.
I'll show you how we correlate that with a couple of different answers, though. So down here, talking to dormant data. Think about, I would bet a lot of people lunch, except that I'm already paying for lunch here, so this is an easy bet for me. So that a quarter, a half, maybe some of you, 2/3 of your data is dormant. It's zombie data that is no longer useful to the organization. But the problem is we can't find it. I can't defensively and intelligently define it so that I can purge it. Everybody talks about dedupe and compression. What's the best form of dedupe? Delete. But I can't. Well, what if I could actually tell you intelligently that these 11,000 files, that 10.5 gigs, has not been touched in more than a year? What if I could tell you who the employees are that own those files? Most of those employees don't even work here anymore. Why do I still spin their data on primary storage? Why do I back it up? Why do I continue to do all the things I do to massage data that is no longer valuable to the organization? Out of those zombie files, and something that happened to Sony, it was a 5-year-old a file that had passwords in it. A lot of times it's this zombie data that gets us in trouble. We've lost track of it. That's where it has sensitive information related to it. Out of those 11,000 files, 4 of them have highly confidential, 7 have birth dates, social security numbers, IP address, 32 have credit cards. Maybe I want to know about that. Maybe on the 366th day, you want me to push that data to the cloud. But again, you don't want me pushing all the credit card numbers to the cloud. So I hold on to those 32 credit card numbers and push the rest of that data to the cloud. So, life cycle management, helping you make sense of that data. And now IT can intelligently define, what's dormant, what's stale in our data. Here's where we had an administrator identify a spike. So Sally just dumped her iPhone over the weekend into the public share because she just upgraded her iPhone. So he sees the spike, he clicks into it, goes in and finds the video content, the audio, some of the images in it, and finds photos of Sally in labor from 6 months prior to that on the public share. She just dumped her phone into the public share with photos of her in her most intimate positions. It's on the public share. And he's like, well, what if Tom had got a hold of that and put that on Facebook and said, look what Sally was doing 6 months ago. Now we got litigation problems. How do you know that's not there today? That's the problem. We don't know what our users are doing. Here's where we had a compliance officer pick up on 20 gig Word documents. One employee had several 20 gig Word documents, pornography that they had changed the file extension on. So I can quickly start to identify that. Maybe you want to set up an alert. Anytime a Word document, a file that shows up 10 gigs or larger, you want to know about it. So we can set up alerts and notifications on that. How many images out of this 128 gigs, how many images do I have? I click on that, it gives me a list of all my images. So I can quickly now search against those. Do any of them have, and this is what schools ask us, do they have marijuana imagery, anything like that I can get out of my environment? Suicidal imagery, imagery or content related to Columbine, things along those lines. Why is that data there? Maybe that helps us introduce another security tactic before people commit a lot of these acts. They digitalize it. That they create content about it. They write a paper about it. Well, maybe everybody's in school has written a paper about Columbine, but why have 2 students written 15 papers or read 30? Maybe they want to know that kind of activity is going on within the environment. And then here is where we automate the search. So as I do my text analytics, I'm looking for content. Maybe I'm looking for the name of your president, or maybe it's credit card or social security information. So these are all bubbles. So as soon as we do a vMotion off of your existing platform to us, some may call this pretty, but this is really ugly. This means I got dormant data. This means I have a lot of what we call tags. I found content in your data that you don't want there, because I'm not looking for the good stuff here. I'm looking for the bad stuff. If I have a lot of bubbles, that's not necessarily a good thing. So let's click into one. So I just clicked into social security files. So out of my 8-point-something million files I have on this little array, 27 of them have social security numbers, it appears. So if you look through here, I've got Word documents, spreadsheets, PDFs, text files, MSGs related to this content. So let's just look. There's W-9s, so we know that's got social security information in it. So let's look through. This one. So I'm going to render a file. I'm going to look inside of it. Yes, this is logged. This activity is. But I'm looking inside of it, so because now IT just gave this to finance and said, hey, you want to know where the social security numbers are? Let me give you your own DataGravity login, and you go find this. So I just opened up this spreadsheet, contractor_info spreadsheet, and I got a list of 1099 employees, and I've got their social security number, their checking account number. This is content, again, on the public share, PII data, that I may not want there. So now, obviously, what's the next question? What's my exposure been? Who's touched it? Every file that resides on our appliance, again, I do text analytics and I continue to watch the activities associated with this. Every file, I give you this information. I give you the timeline of events. There's the file fingerprint, who the owner of the file, when it was created, when it was ingested, who are all the employees that have touched it. A blue is a read, a green is an update. File versioning, how many versions of the file exist out there? Maybe those file names are all different and I need to go search against that fingerprint and find the 25 duplicates. Did someone try to cover up this file and just rename it Taylor Swift audio file? Well, no, it's still got social security number information in it. So now I've just identified that. Maybe you want to drill in a little deeper into just this one specific file. Every file that resides on us, I track all those activities. So now I need to know, first of all, who created it. I just typed the word create in, so I've got the operation, the user, and the timestamp associated with that specific activity. Do I want to know who all has deleted this file? Do I want to know who all has read this file? Any file level operation, any user, any date and timestamp, we can identify those particular activities. But maybe I've got one employee that keeps popping up, and this employee should not be touching social security files, so now I want to dig into an employee. So every employee that's touching the files, I get a view into their world. So these are the folders that Wallace Arrington has permissions to via Active Directory. Wallace is able to look into the public folder, he's able to look into the classics, he's able to look into the sales folder, but as I scroll over each one of these, you can see on the bottom left, I'm tracking every one of that employee's activities. So file activity, the HIPAA requirements, you gotta know who's touching your data. If you don't have your primary storage device watching those patterns, what's the other approach? Software. So you gotta push a scan so that I can go figure it out, and that's a moment in time. I'm watching every activity real time as it occurs, and all I've introduced is 10 gig iSCSI into the environment. So I haven't really introduced complexity. That skill set exists, but as a byproduct of that data residing on the disk, I'm gonna watch the file activity and the interactions of those files as it occurs. Any questions related to a couple of these various concepts we've touched on? Trying to time this with dessert here, so. So I just went into content alerting. I'm not gonna show you everything. I said, we'll answer about 12 to 15 different questions. That one dashboard answered about 8 questions about your data. And we'll keep going. How difficult is it to set up content alerting? And can your HR do this, let's say? So as soon as they get a 2-week notice, they want to watch, let's say, user activity, and I want to watch all of Thomas's deletes, and I just need an alert, and I need to watch deletes, and if Thomas deletes more than 50 files in an hour, and I'll just click on all users, I'm not going to dig in for Thomas's information, and I need to know on every folder or only on selected mount points how many, if Thomas does more than 50 deletes in an hour. I choose the folder, hit create, and I'm done. I just created my own alerts based on as soon as one employee sets that trigger, hits that threshold, I just set up an alert, a notification via email, syslog, SIMS, alert and notifications via those processes. So I can do the same thing. That's where I start to look for content. So I'm looking for the media files, and I want to set up a media file search. Continue. I choose which, do I want to check them all, or do I want to check selected mount points, and I hit create. And so now I'm searching for media files in those particular folders. Done. That allows me now to identify and set up those, whether that's activity alerting or content alerting from there. Here's where I also go and I track it. I can go and dig deeper into activity. I can trend on a keyword, the word confidential, an employee, and a duration time. How many times did that employee interact with a particular keyword over a course of a week, a year, a month? What would I use that data for? Maybe we want to dive deeper into the analytics of our data, the marketing, the sales aspects. What of our data, or why is certain employees trending with certain keywords and expressions within our organization? Maybe there's a merger and acquisition going on, and you want to create alerts and identify what employees have trended with that. And then here I'll click into intelligence management and get into a couple of key concepts. out of our box, we include tags. And so this is where we've created the alerts for you. We've created the regex patterns from social security numbers to birth dates to Medicare numbers to health insurance, patient IDs. I could not possibly know everything you want to find in your data. I did not know that one customer was going to want to identify the word orgasm, so we've externalized it as well. I'll give you an example. This is just to find driver's license numbers. There's the regex pattern. This is just the driver's license patterns for just 6 states that I created a few months ago. Those 6 states there. But we have those regex patterns as well, or obviously if you've got that skill set within your organization, but we're using then those tags. I placed those tags into a profile, so I created an HR profile, and I just dumped 30 tags, so anytime, and then I assign this profile to a folder, a virtual machine. So anytime that content hits that particular folder, I'm alerted, I'm notified, I have notifications based on that. And I choose my notifications. Is this severe, or is this just a notice? Actually, did something hit our virtual machine that was so sensitive, you want me to shut down the virtual machine? We do that as well through our integration with Hyper-V or VMware. I can actually quarantine and lock down a virtual machine and quarantine that data based on the sensitivity of it. Any questions there?
Calls up to ask them why they can't get to their files. I can't see them. Just you, it's like a computer.
So I'm not going to continue to dive in deeper. We have a eDiscovery tile as well here that allows us to, a lot of the chain command that we're being used a lot in litigation. The data's there, and instead of turning over a terabyte of data to an eDiscovery firm so that they can analyze your data, I allow you to do that with your own eDiscovery engine within our appliance. You think about now, by embedding intelligence, analytics into a primary storage device, I can start to deliver a lot of value. I can start to merge about 10 to 15 different tools into your environment, and you're managing an appliance-based approach. We believe, and I can give you the Gartner reports, IDC reports, this is where intelligence is headed. It's the merging of various technologies to drive efficiencies, to drive intelligence at the point of storage or at the disk layer where your data resides. And so that's a concept that we are first to market. We have 3 patents that have introduced this. We are considered the thought leader there, and you'll see more of these technologies introduce this concept, I believe, because again, the process should start kind of where that data, where that bit, where that byte lives, and that's at the disk level. So if there's no more questions, I'll turn it over to you for, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Does your service have the ability to either monitor for a certain amount of time lapsing or a certain period of inactivity where you can be notified so that you have the ability to go back in and start to delete files you no longer need to store? Yeah, so over what duration are we monitoring this data? As long as the data resides on this appliance, customers use us, we see two proof points. A lot of organizations use us as a cleansing to do what we call a data MRI. For me to take an MRI of your data and tell you at a point in time how dirty or how sick your data is. I give you that 20-page report, and you move the data right back off of me. The moment the data leaves me, I can't tell you activity. I'm not tracking interactions any longer. As long as the data resides on me, then yes, we're checking interactions. The question also was around the dormancy of the data, and that kind of what I showed about, we're looking at the last access and last modified date of all your files. So I'm tracking the inactivity or the activity related to that, and that's where in the previous tile, on the bottom left-hand corner, I got into dormancy there. So this tracks the inactivity related to those files or the content that no longer has a valuable, useful life within your organization. Yeah. Yes.
Is your tool primarily based upon the English character set, or can it handle international lexical like characters?
Is it just English language or foreign language or any string of numbers, anything? I can search, I can build a regex around any of any foreign language, any English language, any strings of numbers. If your loan document numbers look like Social Security numbers, I can even pull out false positives related to that based on the format of Social Security numbers. Hopefully your banking's loan document numbers don't look like Social Security numbers, but we've seen that in some instances. Part numbers, things like that look like Social Security numbers in manufacturing. So yes, absolutely. Good question. Anything else? Yes, sir.
For file type identification,
Are we looking at, Monty, Keith, are we looking at file headers or are we just looking at extensions on files as we do our analysis? Back here in the back right.
File headers, you said? Yeah, so yeah, we're capturing the file name, all the file properties, if you will, so the metadata and of course the content. So we can do all these searches Brian was doing, and it's a little bit of a different discussion, a deeper discussion, but we can actually point searches at only the file name, only the content, or both, or just that fingerprint that I pointed out earlier. I can do searches and go find things on the basis of 2 or 3 different angles, if you will. Sounds like that's either I missed the question or you got another one.
What protocols do you work with? Is it just going to be iSCSI and CIFS? Do you do NFS?
Storage protocols is the question.
Yes.
Question was, what storage protocols do we work with? So today we're supporting natively on the platform CIFS SMB protocols, 2.0 and 2.1, if that matters to you, iSCSI, NFS, and then we call out, we have a 4th mount point type we call NFS data store, which is NFS, okay, granted, but we call that out separately for the ESX environment because we treat virtual machines, you might say, as special citizens, if you will. All of this analytics and everything we do is done at the virtual machine resolution layer, not at the data store layer. So I can tell you, I can drive analytics against virtual machine A and completely ignore virtual machine B. I can externalize for you storage folks in the room. I can externalize all of your performance metrics at the virtual machine layer, not at the data store layer. And if you're a storage guy, you know why that's really cool. But things like that. Did that answer the question? Yeah, so it's a multi-protocol storage platform. Yes, sir. Is it negative? No, the question is, are we a competitor, if you will, with, no, compatible with the mainframe world? And when I heard Rack F in there, you're a real MVS guy, aren't you? I'll be darned. Me too. So no, not that environment. So this is going to be, let's say, more your open systems environment. Our, 80% to be candid of our installations at this point anyway are going to be in Microsoft Windows and most certainly VMware ESX cluster environments and Hyper-V. Our integration with VMware is probably as good as it gets in the industry, quite frankly, from a storage standpoint. Anything else? I'll give it back to you, Brian.
Yes, so what I did there, I took one of the fingerprints out of one of the files. I had one file. I searched against that fingerprint, and you can see I've got Joseph, Lorenz, Louise, Maximo's, Manny's. I've got 5 copies of it. I can now take those 4 of those 5 duplicates and help purge that data and start to clean up that duplicate. So I can search against file path, just keyword or fingerprints within this file. So no, we appreciate it. Thank you to the ISSA. Oh yeah, sorry. What do you mean predefined? Are we predefined searches or?
So let me verify. So if we're looking for specific information within the data, how do we define that? Is that and hide that in some way, shape, or form? Like a social security number, they take out the dashes, or is that? So actually, really good question. The question is what if somebody modifies data so that they're trying to hide something like social security number or credit card number? Oh, I lost it. Well, actually, I was going to bring up the regex expressions that we have. You remember the tags that we put up? So we can actually go into those regex expressions and create variants inside there. We've shown driver's license numbers that vary according to state, social security numbers. So in those regex expressions, we can create the ability to look at character strings and say, I'm looking for 9 digits, or I'm looking for this. So you might get some false positives, but yes, we do have the ability to go in and say, I want every variation of this particular character string. Make sense? Okay. Any other questions? Going once, going twice, gone. That's it. We're done.